Hello, this is story 29, the Memento Mori. And Memento Mori, probably most of you know what it is, but it's Latin, roughly translates to English for remember your mortality. Memento Mori, remember your mortality. And usually in more modern applications, it has to do with people taking a souvenir, kind of morbid, but a souvenir off to remember somebody that's passed away. In Victorian days, it would be a locket of hair typically before they buried somebody, or when the early photographs came out, the daguerreotypes, around about 1838, 1840. Very first photographs. Actually, they were able to take photographs around about 1800, but the problem they had was, and it's a big problem, they were able to take photographs well before 1838, 1840, the daguerreotypes, but as soon as they were exposed to sunlight, they would bleach white, it would disappear. So 1838 in France, a man named, I think his last name is Daguerreau, came up with a way so that the images on the photographs did not disappear when exposed to sunlight. So the early Memento Moris, the photographs were used, they'd take pictures of their deceased loved one. They thought it was, they were trying to figure out, what are we going to use the camera for? And they came up with, well, before we bury someone, we'll take a picture of them so we'll always know what they look like, you know. And well, in this case, the Memento Mori comes into play in this. This story, in some ways, revolves around a Memento Mori in a house that I wound up living in. And that house was in Putnam Station, New York, and that's to say, it was on the northeastern part of New York, on the banks of Lake Champlain, with Vermont on the other side. A lot of mountains, obviously. Fort Ticonderoga is about 5 miles north of Putnam Station. And Putnam Station is a very small town. It's not really even a town. So, how did I wind up in Putnam Station? Well, I was working about 17 miles south of there in Whitehall, New York, as a training sergeant in New York Army National Guard Unit, infantry. And I, at the time, was about 29, something like that, around about 29, 28, 29. And there was a German woman, that I met, not in the military. I met her other ways, but it doesn't matter. It wasn't online either. I met her through my brother, who was stationed in Berlin. He came back to New York with some German people, and that's how I met her. And her name, she probably wouldn't want, she's deceased now, and she wasn't very old. She passed on with cancer at a fairly young age. And she went by the nickname of Angel. And I went to Berlin a number of times. And she's probably, in my estimate, and quite a few other people's as well, one of the most attractive women in that entire city. And I've got a story on her myself that I'll get to eventually. She was also one of the most intelligent people I ever met. So I, at the time, was quite enamored with her. And on one of my trips to Berlin, I hang out with her at her parents, her mother. She lived with her mother and her brother Franz. I proposed to her, and she accepted right before I got on the plane to come back to New York because I had to work. And I was very happy, and I asked her, well, where do you want, I will prepare a place. Do you want to live in the city or the countryside? She said, definitely in the countryside. She lived in the city her whole life in Berlin. And so I said, well, I'll get us a place and I'll send for you. And we'll be married and live happily ever after. That was the idea. So when I got back, I started writing letters. This was right before cell phones, you know. Did a lot of letter writing, and would exchange letters, and I would illustrate them, and wrote a lot of letters, thought out. That's a lost art, I think, and it is an art. It's not the same as sending a text, not even near. When you sit down with just your thoughts and a cup of coffee or something, and just a bunch of paper and a pen in front of you, and you can really draft up some thoughts, I think that go a little further than texting it out or typing it out sometimes. I used to illustrate them. But at the same time, I started looking for a house. And found a place in Putnam Station, as I said, a farmhouse for rent. And the price seemed right, and I gave the man a call, and he said it was still available. I drove up there to look at it, and I've got a lot of pictures for this video that I took off the internet. But this photograph I took myself of the place. In front of this place it's all mountains there, but I climbed up on this mountain that was across the street from my place, and took this picture and a number of them and sent them to her in Berlin in my letters. Well, this one I kept, but this was one of many, just to show her this beautiful country place that I had, and it was indeed beautiful. And so here's that picture. I forgot I cut my thumb. I'm doing the dishes and cut my thumb on a serrated knife of all things. Right, the picture. And as you can see, it is very rural. Nothing fancy. A very beautiful countryside. And idyllic. And it was a working dairy farm. There was a couple people, well, all right, off the picture. I was speaking to the landlord, the man that owned this house. I'll tell you the history of the place, what I know of it, all right? I never got a date on when it was built, but judging by the stonework that made up the foundation and cellar and the timbers that made up the main joist of the house, and the timbers were they were trees that still had bark on them, really old trees. That place was probably a couple hundred years old anyway. And there was a man that lived there, a man born around 1900. And he lived to be quite an old man, and he lived there with his sister, I understand. The landlord, the man that bought the house and was renting it, he lived right up the road a little ways. And there weren't many people on this road, but he had a beautiful home up the road, nice little ranch. And he was a really nice guy. I used to go over to his place. Him and his wife would have me over for dinner, and he talked quite a bit. And I know the man's name that owned the house, the spirit that comes into this story. And I knew his grandson. His grandson was my age and was in my guard unit. And we were friends of sorts, you know. And so I'm not going to say the man's real name. We'll just call him John Sills. It doesn't really matter anyway. But yeah, we'll call him John Sills. And so the landlord told me that John lived there. He was born in that house. He died in that house. Him and his sister. It was a family farm. It was a dairy farm for years, and John farmed the place. It still had several barns, outbuildings, nothing fancy, and it still had the dairy equipment in it, stainless steel stuff. And so John was born there. He died in the house, and then the property came into the landlord's hands, who was a retired man from New York City. He and his wife. He was a retired exec from DuPont, CEO, he told me. And a really nice guy. And he retired out and decided he had enough in New York City and moved up north and was living the dream. So I'm in the house and I'm looking at it and I'm talking to this man. And the first thing I notice is that whoever lived there before, see, there was John Sills, he died, Then there was another set of tenants that came in there, a young man and a newlywed young man and his wife, and they had a baby. And they moved in there, and they didn't stay very long. And I'll get into that. So first thing I noticed, I'm standing in there with this landlord, a man who looked to be about 65, a cotton-headed guy. I see that the table in the kitchen still has plates with food on it, glasses there with milk, kind of look like it'd been sitting out for a week, or so. There's still food and stuff on the table. Dirty dishes on the counter. In the garage was a late model car for that year, a brand new car, and all their furniture was there, a lot of their clothes, kid toys. Looked like they just stepped out, aside from the food looked pretty stale on the table, and I thought it was pretty strange. And they had some nice stuff. It appeared to me that this young man and his wife weren't poor people, because it was a nice car in the garage, brand new one. And the furniture and stuff looked top. And I don't know what it was with this guy, but I decided, after we were talking about the place, I decided to go out on a limb, because I'd pretty much had it with haunted houses at this point in time. And just bad luck, fed up with it. And I seeing this stuff laying there, like the people left in a hurry, obviously. I went out on a limb and I asked this guy, I said, is this place all right? Is it quiet? And I know this because I wrote this down. I wrote some of these stories down years ago, and I've just reread them, but I remembered it anyway. But the little details, it was good that I wrote it down. I said, is this place all right? Is it quiet? And the guy looks at me kind of weird, smiling. He says, what do you mean? All right. And he's looking at me kind of intently, smiling. And I thought, well, all right. I said, is it haunted? Is there anything going on here? And the guy was taken back with that. And I'm thinking, oh, great. He says, have the people in town been talking to you? And I said, no, nobody's talked to me. He said, well, it's just John. That's not his real name. It's just John. And he said, I knew John. John was a really good guy. He won't hurt you. He said, yeah, it's just John. He was an eccentric guy, a very nice guy. He loved everything to do with the stars. And he was very popular. Everybody knew him and liked him in town. And just John, he won't hurt you. You have nothing to worry about. And I'm thinking like, oh, great. Thinking that. Well, I decided to take the place. It was just that beautiful. Let me tell you about how beautiful it was. I mean, it had a wraparound back porch behind it and a nice big kitchen with a wood-burning stove in it that you could cook on, big old stove. It's gorgeous. There was no traffic. It was very rural, very quiet. I mean, this place was so far removed from any large city. About 100 miles would be the next largest city, 100 miles south, Albany, probably, thereabouts. It was just quiet. And at nighttime, the sky got properly dark. That's to say that really brilliant starry skies, and if it was overcast, pitch black. All you could hear, you couldn't even hear any traffic. I think I had a car come down the road once an hour, maybe, during the daytime, none at night. It was very quiet. And I thought it was perfect. And they had the barns and everything. And I had a decent job. I was young yet, Things were looking up. And so I took the place. And wouldn't worry about John, eccentric John. Anyway, I'd deal with that if I had to. And so when this occurred, it was probably, early spring. My children were set to come. They lived with their mother on the other side of the state, up by Thousand Islands, the west side, northwest side of the state, on the other side of the Adirondack Mountains, and I lived on the east side by Lake Champlain in Vermont. So While I'm talking, I'm going to start cycling through some pictures I took of Putnam Station so you get an idea of what it was like there. Very, very beautiful. No work to speak of, but it's very beautiful. Where was I? So I'm writing letters to Angel. Simona was her first name, really, Simona. And I'm not hearing back from her. And I thought we were going to get married. That was what we agreed on before I left Berlin. And I'm not hearing back. Not hearing back. Not answering phone calls. I didn't have a phone in the house. I used back in those days a payphone with a zillion quarters, just like on the old movies. Nothing. In fact, it got more and more frustrating for me there as the weeks turned into months and the spring turned into summer and no word from her. In fact, I wouldn't see her again for 10 years or hear from her. So it took me about 3 months to figure it out. I've been stood up. And I wasn't very happy about that, but life goes on. That's how the cookie crumbles, sometimes. So I had to get ready for my children, all right? Life goes on. My children were all like ages 7 to 12, thereabouts. Daughter and 3 sons. And I had to get ready for them. And back to this haunted house. Very quickly, I found out that the place was indeed haunted. It was not unusual to have a lot of raps on the walls, to hear distinctly somebody walking around with footsteps. I just ignored this stuff. I really ignored it. I want to tell you, this time I went to church 3 times a week. I went to the Sunday service. I went to the men's prayer meeting Sunday evening. No, I take that back. It was a Sunday evening service. And I went to Wednesday morning prayer meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning, where the guys in the church would get together and fellowship and pray, read some Bible and stuff, and just talk and stuff like that. So I wasn't worried about anything. I knew I was covered. So I just ignored it. And that's the way I was brought up. My mom's side has the paranormal stuff. And my mom has a lot of paranormal things happen. Not like me, but her share of them. And apparently so did her mother. Because her mother told her that when these things happen, you're to ignore them, not to give them energy. Don't give them any thought or any time of your energy. So I did my best to do that. And if something happened that scared me, I would say some prayers and I would rest assured that God had me covered. And I had no doubt at all that my Lord had me covered and protected. Because He's in charge of all things on this earth and things unseen. And He's created all of it. Any spirit out there, He created it. Anything. It's His. He has authority. And Jesus Christ has authority. And He cemented that authority on the cross. So I believe that. But this spirit, I started thinking wasn't, well, I don't know. All right, back to the house. I started clearing out the rooms upstairs because my plan was that my children would use the upstairs bedrooms. This house, here's a floor plan of this house, all right? I'm going to put this up. I drew it out. Floor plan. Bang. Now, this is just the first floor plan, all right? I'll tell you, the stairs went up, and there was a hallway, and there were 4 small bedrooms. There was no bathroom, just 4 small rooms, each one with a very small closet. Now, on the downstairs floor plan that you're seeing here, I'd like you to take note of a few things that play into this story. And this is a story. It plays out. John Sills and Spirit and Memento Mori and myself and who knows what. Note the woodshed that's part of the house, and the kitchen and the dining room and the small room off to the side of the dining room they called the dining room, which was my bedroom. More on that later. And I would like you to know where the front door is, the front porch, on this crude drawing, the floor plan, and how the layout of the house is from the dining room, where if I looked out the window right there, I would be able to see the front door very clearly from the dining room window. Where am I? It's easy for me to, not natural to really talk like this. I still haven't got it down. So that plays into the story later. I mean, the way it was, I heated the place with wood, and you could walk through the kitchen. You didn't even have to go outside to get the wood, because between the garage and the kitchen was the wood room, and it was full, had about 2 face cord of cut up logs, just roughly piled up in there, all dried out, really good stuff to burn. So you just walk out through the kitchen and that side door there, and you get the wood and put it in the wood stove in the kitchen, which I had, or walk through the kitchen and go right into the garage. Kind of a nice setup. So back to the story. Illustration off. So the place was haunted. I had no doubt about that. Little things, knocks on the wall, footsteps, things like that. One thing, though, that was very peculiar that happened to me more than once there. I went upstairs in the bedroom, one of the rooms, and there was nothing in this room, and I heard a lot of voices all around me. It sounded like I was in the middle of a banquet hall. There was a multitude of people talking, some laughing. Sounded like a family reunion, a big one at that. Like, it would sound like a banquet hall with a lot of people in it. Couldn't make out anything he was saying, but it's just a den of all these voices all around me. And I thought, what the? I thought maybe somebody was pulled up in front of my place and had their radio on. I did not have a TV set. I still do not. I had a radio and a small one, and I rarely turned it on. If I wanted music, I played guitar and I sang. Now and then I'd put some music on the radio, but it wasn't on. So the place was quiet. So once again, I didn't think spirits or paranormal. I thought somebody must have parked in my front yard with their radio on. I couldn't think of anything else. So I left the room, and that's when I didn't hear it anymore. I went outside, there was nobody anywhere. Of course, broad daylight. That was odd. And that happened to me more than once. And so I want to tell you that I also went into one room that must have been John Sills' bedroom or something. It had or maybe the previous tenants moved his stuff up in there. And he had some things in there, boxes with old books in it, all astrology, just like my landlord told me. He was a nut about astrology. And a beautiful place. You could see the sky so nice at night, lit up like crazy. And some pots and pans and some old clothing and some other things. And I moved all that stuff out and put it all into the barn. I wanted it all cleared out for when my children came. What else? There's something else. No, I moved that out. There's something else. Well, at any rate. So my children showed up. They arrived midsummer. And we had a good time. We always had a good time. I recall playing around in the kitchen, dancing a tango with my daughter. I don't know how to dance tango, or just playing around. And I bought a BB gun, like a Red Ryder BB gun. And my sons and I were shooting that, my daughter too. We were having fun with that. And I remember it was the luckiest shot I ever had. I'm in the kitchen, and in the living room, there's a light with a light bulb just hanging down from the living room. Just a light bulb hanging off a cord. And I said, watch this, I said to my son, Tommy. And there was a fly, and I could see it back. You could see a fly. I said, see that fly on that light bulb? He says, yep. I said, watch this. And I aimed, and pulled the trigger, just BB flew off, and I hit that fly, shot it right off that light bulb. Fly went zing, didn't break the light bulb. And my son was like, wow, wow. I couldn't believe it either, you know. I shot a fly off a light bulb, didn't break the light bulb from about 15 feet away. I just played it off like, well, that's just the way I am. You know, Dad's that good of a shot. I almost am that good of a shot, or I was, but that was something, luck. Well, one day, my son Tommy went upstairs, and they weren't sleeping. Nobody was sleeping upstairs. They were all sleeping downstairs with me. Nobody slept upstairs. Tommy went upstairs, and I didn't have a problem with it. He was exploring the house like kids do. And he came downstairs, and my daughter and my other two sons and I were in the kitchen. Good piece away. He was up on the other side of the house upstairs. And he's scratching his head. He's going, that's strange. He's actually scratching his head. That's really weird. I go, what's up? He said, I was in a room upstairs, and I heard all these people all around me talking. And he said, there was nobody around me. He said, but I heard a lot of people all around me talking, just like I did. But I didn't tell him that. You think I want my kids scared of ghosts? Try being a parent when you got little kids afraid of ghosts. They don't sleep at night. They'll be in your bed. I made up a white lie. And I said, well, you probably just heard us talking, coming through the heat vents, you know, up into there. And I hated to do that, but I didn't want my kids afraid there. And he said, yeah, you're probably right. And he didn't give it a second thought. But I personally knew that he just substantiated what I experienced there. And as an afterthought, I said, I don't want anybody going upstairs anymore. Upstairs is off limits. We just stay downstairs. I said, we don't need to go up there anyway. And that was that. So we got through the summer. There weren't any, other than that, there wasn't any haunting events going on with my kids there that I can recall or that I wrote about, other than that one. And then the summer came to an end, and I drove my children back to their moms on the other side of the state, about a 3.5 hour, 4 hour drive through the mountains. And I returned back to that place all by myself, and that was depressing. And then summer turned to fall, and fall into winter. And beautiful seasons there, but the winter was very hard. And the hauntings took on a harder, they got a little harsher. The spirit in there learned a new trick. And I started thinking he wasn't so copacetic. The wood room, because I spent all of my time there in the kitchen. That's where the wood burning stove was. That's everything is. I didn't have a TV. I didn't use the living room, dining room, whatever you want to call it. I slept in that one room, and it was very comfortable there. In there, the dining room. And mostly sat in the kitchen and played guitar. Read a Bible, whatever. But the spirit started taking wood from inside the wood room and throwing it up against the wall. And that's pretty loud. These are like 10, 15 pound logs. I'd be sitting there and all of a sudden, bang, 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 thump, thump, thump. It's like he was just going to town throwing logs up against the wall where the kitchen was, where I'm in the kitchen. So you can imagine how loud that is. And it was very unsettling. And I'd jump up and I'd open the door, and then there would be nothing there. There would be nothing. Every time that he did that, or I'd open the door and all was quiet. And you wonder, wow, that'd be pretty scary. But honestly, if you're living by yourself and you don't investigate, how are you ever going to sleep at night? So I also knew I had the Lord on my side. And he had my back on this, so a little unnerved, yes, frightened, maybe a little, not enough. So things started coming to a head, and I'll move on in this story. I don't want to leave anything out. I remember I used to go for long walks there. I'd walk up the road on all winter, spring, summer, fall. I go for a walk up to where used to be a general store and a gas station across from the post office in Putnam Station. And that's to say that was about a 2.5, 3 mile walk one way. Nothing major, but it was beautiful there. Haunted house or not, it was a beautiful area, very peaceful, nice. And when I got up near the store, I encountered one of the Putnamites, I called them, the Putnam Station. A woman looked to be about 40, very sociable woman. She was walking the road, and we started talking. Standing in the middle of the road. There wasn't any traffic. It's just some really back road, very quiet. And she heard I lived in that John Sills place. I almost said his real name. Yeah, and she's looking at me, and she said, "How is it there?" I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "Well, everybody in town knows that place has a bad reputation for being haunted." And I'm thinking, like, I didn't say anything. I'm thinking, great. I didn't find any humor in it. Not only was I living alone in a haunted house, but this is also, I called it back then, that house was supposed to be my love nest, my marriage nuptial love nest. It was a tomb for my dead love. It was very lonely. I was heartbroken, upset. The fact that the place had an active spirit in it really was upsetting. I said, "No, it's nice there. I'm sorry, I don't usually lie, but I didn't think they had a right to know my business." "No, nothing unusual." And she didn't believe me. She kept pushing for a story. "Come on now, you can tell me," she'd tell me. "Nothing really out of the usual, nothing to tell you." Then she told me what happened to the people that lived there, the people who left all their food on the table. She said, "Well, the people that were there before you, they left in a hurry." I said, "Yeah, I saw that." She said, "Well, what, you want to know the story behind that day when they left?" "Sure." She said, "Well, they sat down to have lunch together, and they needed some milk and something. They needed something from the store. So the young man and his wife and their little toddler, I think they had a little kid, they got in the car and they drove up to the store, got what they needed. They came back to the house. Their lunch was still on the table, and everything they had was piled up in the middle of the floor. And I tell you what, I've seen this before. I've heard of it before. I think when a spirit does that, it's telling you it wants you out of the house. It's just my speculation. And I said, "Wow." She said, and then she said they had that happen to them before. It wasn't the first time their things were all piled up in a pile. Clothes, everything. She said that they saw something, that they said that apparently they told people what had happened in town. They had a problem. They saw a ghost cat there. I never seen anything like that when I was there. I did in a couple of other stories that I'll get to eventually, but not this place. She said, but something happened there that day when they came back and found all their stuff in a pile. Something really bad. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, what's that?" And she wouldn't tell me. And she said, "I'm not going to tell you. You don't really want to know." But it was really bad, really scary. And they left that place. And they left that place that day. They took their kid, grabbed their wallet, whatever, got out the door, left one of their cars there, left everything. And I'm like, all right. And she told me that John Sills, among other things, she said that he was buried in a cemetery. There were two cemeteries next to this place, one really old one and one kind of not so old. Said he was buried in accordance with his wishes, standing above ground in like a vault. And I'm not able to substantiate whether that's true or not. And I really didn't want to. But I wouldn't rule it out. And when I was walking back, I kind of feeling kind of bitter, sour grapes. I look over there and I see what looks like a concrete phone booth, I thought. I don't know if that's anything. I thought, great. I was really fed up with it all. that was the end of that. But I will say, these people did come back about 2 weeks later, right when I was starting to move in. They came back at some point. I wasn't there. The landlord must have let them in, but they got everything out of there. They got their car. They got everything, cleared it out. And I never saw them, never heard from them. All right, back and forth on this. But let's get back. My kids had gone back. I'm back. They went back to their moms on the other side of the state. I'm there alone, all alone. The ghost for company. And I'm not alone because I did a lot of praying. I prayed all the time, out loud. I sang. I wasn't alone. Well, you know what I mean. And it was turning winter, and this is where the story comes to a head. I came home from work one day, and it was really snowing hard out. And I had a brand new Jeep Wrangler. Had really nice tires on it, so I'd never drive through anything with that. But I remember pulling into my front driveway, and it was already kind of dark out because it's winter. And I remember getting out of the Jeep, and it was snowing so hard. Big flakes. They were just coming straight down. There was no wind. But I remember my hearing was so good then. It's not now. My head rings and everything now. I could actually hear the snowflakes hitting like a quiet rush all over, the snow just piling up. And I went inside and did what I usually do, I guess, play guitar a little bit. I don't know, practice guitar, sing, pray to God, do dishes, eat some food, whatever, and go to bed. And I want to say something else. Living there alone, like I did, jilted, somewhat haunted. You'd think that I might be prone to turn to booze. I didn't. I don't think I drank hardly at all, honestly, and definitely no drugs. I don't think I did anything. Oh, not even coffee that much. It was pretty straight laced. Yeah, so I went to bed. Oh, the dining room. That was my bedroom. I want to explain that. I'm sorry to backtrack so much, but I'm trying to remember things in this story without writing them down like a script. I had dinner with my landlord and his wife quite a bit. That guy like adopted me as a son he never had, I thought. Well, he wasn't very old then. He wanted to sell me the place. He was going to help me turn it into a working dairy farm, but that didn't happen. We started talking about I didn't want to do that. That's why it didn't happen. He really wanted me to buy the place and farm it. But, it was too big a house for me alone. Well, he told me about that room. He said, well, the dining room, that one down there, he said it was always the most comfortable room in the house. And that is to say, warm near the where the heater would be, or a fireplace, or in this case, a wood stove. And it had a nice view on the one window in there. You could look out the window from your bed and see the green fields, green and gold fields, rolling hills, and then the blue lake, and towering up the green mountains of Vermont. And in the fields on the New York side, behind my place, was a huge old stone house where the roof had fallen in and floors. And this great big stone, the walls stood up in gray, big old house, but just the walls stood. That was a really nice view. And he explained that you went in that room because it was the most comfortable, and if things didn't work out, you died, they moved, that's where people come view your body. And they just put you in the dining room, or what became the living room. And that was a funeral parlor. They didn't have funeral homes around back in the olden days, not in this part of America. So, all right, that night, I don't know why I wanted to explain that. That night, the night where it was snowing really hard out, and I'd done my usual evening things, and I went to bed. And 3 o'clock in the morning, bang, 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 like somebody pounding on my door with their fist, violently, 3 times, bang, bang, bang. And I jump up out of bed like, whew, I was really startled. Nobody visited me. And it was really violent. Like bang, bang, bang. And I actually was scared a little. And I kind of crept down around and went to my living room. And from my living room, I'd be able to view the front of my house and my front door right there in front of me. And I left the light on. I had like a 120 volt bulb in the light, porch light outside. I always left it on. It lit the whole front of the place up easily. And there were no bushes or anything really to speak of, or anywhere for anybody to hide. So I looked there to see who's pounding on my door. There's nobody there. Nothing. Whole place is lit up. It had stopped snowing. It was pristine out, starry out. No snow, nothing. No wind. Nothing's blowing. Really quiet out. And there was no footprints, no disturbance at all of any sort in the snow in front of my door. That's to say a foot of fresh snow anywhere. My Jeep was out there partially buried. Nothing. So I thought that was pretty weird. So I said some prayers to God for protection and things like that. Tried to put it out of my mind. I had to go to work in the morning. And as soon as my head hit the pillow, bang, 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 again on my front door, really loud, and, bang, somebody pounding on it distinctly. And this time I grabbed my rifle. I had a rifle in the bedroom, not much, I had 22, and I got a flashlight. And again, holding that rifle like for protection, because I was scared this time. And I look out the window in the dining room to see who's pounding on my door again. Nobody's there. I'm like, what the? Now I'm just perplexed. The snow hasn't been touched. Nothing. I can't overemphasize it. There was nothing out there. So, okay, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Well, actually, I looked again out that window, and I saw something that I didn't see before. I saw a small, looked like a pillow, an object, sitting on top of the snow in front of my door. Not buried in snow, placed on top of the snow, with no snow on top of it, this item. I'm like, what the, I went up into my kitchen, opened the door up, looked around, nobody's out there, noticed again that there were no footprints, no marks at all, and all this like that much fresh snow, nothing. All right, what's this sitting in front of my door? And how to get there? I pick it up, it is a pillow, a white pillow with a lot of watermarks on it, like brown watermarks, like stains. I'm like, what the heck? I got the rifle cradle in my arm, looking at this thing. Brought it in the kitchen. I'm looking at this pillow. It was a white pillow about that long, rectangular shape, about that thick. About that thick. And I thought, well, it's not a pillow made for comfort like you'd have on your bed. It was too thin, too small. It's not a throw pillow for your couch either. It's white. I said, it looks like something to be in a casket, a coffin. And I put that together. I threw it on my table, got my rifle again, and a flashlight, and I went outside into the snow in the night. It's like 3 a.m. And I checked all the barns. I looked all over for anybody. I had to have the peace of mind that nobody was out there. Somebody did this. How, I didn't know. I even went around and went in the back behind the place. There was the only way to get into the cellar was through the back. There was only one way in and out. Dirt floor, stone walls, logs with old bark on them. Looked around the cellar, nobody in there. There's nobody outside, no evidence that anybody had been outside, not even a mouse, proverbial mouse. It was starry out, no wind, that kind of crystal calm night. Well, I went back in, and I wasn't really afraid. I was kind of angry at being disturbed again by a ghost of some sort. What else would have placed, it was placed on top of the snow. on top of the snow directly in front of my door. There was no snow on top of this. Somebody had just put it there. Well, I got up in the morning to go to work, and nothing else happened that night. I looked at that pillow, and I was angry. Really, I said, I think I'm going to take it home and burn it when I get home from work. I'm going to throw it in the burn barrel. Well, I got home from work, and during the day, I had a little second thoughts. Maybe better not do that. Why piss off whatever's in here, even worse. Voice of reason kicked in at some point, said, don't burn that thing. I wanted to. I was so fed up with things. So what I did was I took it upstairs to where it was part of the things. I'd taken this with the other things out to the garage or the barn, and it was out there getting wet. Probably that's all the stains on it. Well, I put it back in that room and I shut the door. And I think that was a good move. But things didn't stop. Things were still going on. The banging on the walls, the footsteps, and namely, I'm throwing the logs up against the wall when I'm sitting in the kitchen. Now that's pretty violent. Throwing firewood logs up against the wall, like it would be this wall. Imagine how loud and nerve-wracking that is. I got fed up with it. And I'm in there alone, it's wintertime, and I decided I had nothing to lose. I was going to address this spirit. This was right after a particularly violent night of log throwing in the wood room. And so I gave a little speech. And I figured I had nothing to lose. I said, look, you had your time here. And that's over. I said, now it's my time here. This is my life. I said, I pay the rent. I fix the leaky roof. I make sure I fix the pipes, and I do the maintenance on this place. You don't, not anymore. I said, you've got to stop scaring me. I said, you're starting to scare me, and I don't like that. I said, I'm going to move out if you keep doing this. And if I move out, I said, somebody bad might move in here. Somebody dirty, somebody noisy. And you're not going to like that. So you've got to stop scaring me, or I'm going to move out. And I said, and if you don't, and if you keep it up, I said, I just might call on the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ. I used his name, but the Holy Spirit, Christ himself, said that name is sacred. That's big guns. I said, I might call on the Holy Spirit to come in here and quiet you down, or better yet, show you the way out. I said, I don't want to have to do that. I figured it was John Sills because his mother's the pillow. This comes more in the story. So I figured it was him. I said, I don't want to do that. You're welcome to stay here, but you've got to stop scaring me. And that was it. And I want to tell you, from that time on, nothing happened ever again. Nothing. That house took on a peace like you wouldn't believe. I don't know if he just decided to stop messing with me. I don't know if he moved on. I don't know if the Holy Spirit moved him on. Whatever the case was, nothing ever happened there again. It was very nice. But I did move out about 6 months later because it was just too far from my work, and it's just me living there, It was too lonely. So I moved out. And our story doesn't stop there. Not at all. Now get this. I'm in a bar. At my work, the Armory had a bar in it. And after drill, it's just like an old New York guardsmen always do. After they drill on the weekend, they get together and have some beers. So I'm sitting in there drinking some beers, talking to this guy on this side of me. And John Sills' grandson, another soldier in our unit, is sitting on this side of me, facing another way, talking to another guy. And I'm telling this guy the story that I just told you about the Sills house. And when I said something about the pill, I already told his grandson, hey, that place is haunted. but we didn't go on about it much with him. It was his grandfather. And as soon as I came to the part about the little white pillow, this guy all of a sudden turned around, and this guy was part Indian. And he turned white. And I noticed it. And he says, tell me that. He says, tell me that story you just told him. I said, oh man, I'm sorry. I know that was your grandfather. He said, no, I'm all right with that. He says, tell me that story about the pillow and tell me what happened. And I told him that. And this guy, he turned pale. He says, you're not going to believe this. He said, but when I was a little boy, he said, I remember I was at my great-grandmother's funeral, and my grandfather, John, not his real name, and her were very close, very, very close. And he said, I remember that before they closed the lid on our casket, that his grandfather leaned down, kissed her on the forehead, and then gently lifted her head up and took the little white pillow out, and then put her head back down, and then they closed the lid, and they buried her. And he said that white pillow was his most prized possession. I am not making this story up. Not at all. And man, that's something, isn't it? Yeah. So when people say they think all spirits are demonic or something, or they're just memories or something like that, or I don't buy that. Some are, sure. And I don't advocate anybody to ghost hunt or go looking for this stuff. I didn't. I didn't. I have never looked for it. But I'm telling you the story. And some other stories I got. Why? Because I'm going to tie it together. God allowed these things to happen to me. And for a reason. Because I was going to church. I was living about as upright a life as I could. And these things still happen to me. So I knew someday I would turn it around. And I will. Eventually, hopefully. So that's it. Story 29. The Memento Mori. And you know what? I'm darn glad I didn't burn it. I'm glad I put it back up in that room where it came from and closed the door reverently and left everything alone. I never went upstairs again. Never. And that was a good call. I have what I call the voice of reason. I think we all do. It's like a quiet voice in me that sometimes speaks, always gives me the best advice. Not the surface, there's like 3 levels of our consciousness. The surface one that, sometimes can act erratic. But that's the Memento Mori. So, story 30, hopefully, I don't know what it'll be. Oh, I was going to do this, sorry. Yeah, story 30. Forthcoming.